Samsung just released their latest device in the Note series, the Galaxy Note 9. And for the first time in a year or so, we actually have a Note-sized battery, like a properly large battery in it, which I'm excited about. First things first, Samsung was kind enough to send me the device, so I figured it was time for me to try to do a complete walkthrough for you guys. Now, if you're not familiar, a complete walkthrough on this channel is where I try to go through every single feature I possibly can on a device so that you guys are better prepared should you be in the market to buy one. And with that said, we have a lot to go through. Let's get started with the hardware. The Note 9 is made out of Gorilla Glass 5 on the front and the back with an aluminum frame. It's a bit heavier and more solid feeling than the Note 8, I think, probably in part at least to that new frame, just like the S9 was versus the S8. I like it though, as I did with the S9 and S9 Plus. It just feels more premium to me. And we finally have some new colors for a change. I've always been annoyed with whoever is telling manufacturers through like their, research programs that Americans only want black phones. So it's nice to see that Samsung and other manufacturers are finally starting to give us color options. The Note 9, for example, has a metallic copper color that's not coming to the States, I don't think, but we have lavender purple, midnight black, and ocean blue. Also, the S Pen now matches each of the colors except for the blue, which comes with a yellow pen, which I'm a sucker for, and I love for some reason. Now on the front, we have the largest Note screen ever. It's a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED display with a 1440 by 2960 resolution and an 18 by 5 by 9 aspect ratio. That screen is HDR10 compliant, like most nowadays, frankly, and is always on display feature that we're used to seeing from Samsung. Now above the screen, we have our 8-megapixel f1.8 aperture front camera. At the bottom, we have our small bezel with our software pressure-sensitive button like the Note 8. On the right, we have our power button. On the left, we have our volume buttons and our Bixby button. At the top, we have either our dual SIM or our SIM and micro SD card slot combo, depending on market. And at the bottom, we have our USB-C port, speaker, 3.5mm headphone jack, and our S Pen that has a clickable mechanism to release and lock it back in place. And also makes for a great fidget spinner, by the way. Now speaking of my new fidget spinner, it's been upgraded this year. It can do all the normal S Pen things we're used to hardware-wise. It's also added Bluetooth Low Energy connectivity though. This allows you to use it not near the phone screen to do things like remotely use the camera, use it for PowerPoint presentations, etc. We'll get more into that in a second shortly when we get into the software though. On the back, we have dual 12-megapixel cameras that are identical basically to the Galaxy S9 Plus. We have our main one with its dual aperture of f1.5 or f2.4 and dual pixel autofocus with optical stabilization. And we have our secondary 2x telephoto camera with an aperture of f2.4 and optical stabilization as well. These are paired with an LED flash. Now under the camera, we have our fingerprint sensor in the right spot, in the middle. In addition to that fingerprint sensor, we do have iris scanning and facial recognition and intelligent scan, which is a combo of the two. But I find that for most Galaxy devices with it, and the Note 9 is no different, it's pretty hit or miss, and I can usually enter my PIN in faster than it recognizes me, so I just stick with the fingerprint sensor. Internally, we have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 or an Exynos 9810, depending on your market, 6 gigs of RAM if you get the 128 gig storage model, or 8 gigs of RAM if you get the 512 gig storage model. Which means, by the way, that if you put a 512 gig micro SD card in that model, you now have a 1 terabyte phone. That's nuts. We also have Bluetooth 5.0 as well as aptX HD for higher quality Bluetooth audio streaming, as well as A2DP. Now for the software, the Galaxy Note 9 is running Android 8.1 with Samsung's UI, previously called TouchWiz UI, now called Samsung Experience on top at version 9.5. Now, since it's very similar to other versions of the OS you guys are used to seeing, and since this is an unlocked version, there isn't much as far as bloatware besides the inclusion of the Fortnite installer and some of Samsung's normal software. So I'm going to just go through the one big thing software-wise that makes a Note, the S Pen features. Now taking out the S Pen will automatically bring up Air Command. This is a semicircle of various Samsung apps that are pre-installed and meant to be used with the pen. You can customize this list to change what S Pen apps show up, as well as put other apps and functions in there if you want as well. Quickly, here's a rundown of each of the S Pen apps. Notes. This is Samsung's own note-taking app that is optimized for using the S Pen compared to others. Although I have used Evernote with it and it works just fine. Smart Select. Use the S Pen to take a screenshot of a specific section of the screen. You can also extrapolate out text, etc. Screen Write, which allows you to capture a screenshot and then instantly be able to annotate it with the pen. Live Message, which allows you to draw something or even draw on an image and then send it via any messaging service to someone as an animated GIF that'll show them you drawing the image. This works when sending to any device, by the way, whether it's a Note, another Android device, or an iPhone. It just shows up as a GIF. Bixby Vision. Now this normally is an app that uses the camera to try out makeup, translate text, do image searches, find products to shop for, identify food, wine, scan QR codes, etc. It's basically Samsung's version of Google Lens. But in this scenario, when you use it through Air Command, it allows you to highlight things on the screen to then use those same features to determine what is on the screen. Translate, which lets you hover over text on the screen with the pen to translate into another language. Magnify, which allows you to hover over the area of the screen with the S Pen to magnify it. Glance, which creates a picture-in-picture window kind of thing out of your current app that you can hover over to temporarily full screen again, or tap and hold to drag around, or trash can it to remove it. PenUp, which is a third-party app for creating drawings. You can sign up for a free account and then share drawings or view other artists' work. The cool thing about it in this version is that it has the ability to actually re-watch the people drawing the art instead of just the final art. Coloring, which is a shortcut to the coloring section of the PenUp app, where you can color in art using the S Pen. It seems to be something people are using to calm themselves on Twitter, oddly enough. Now besides these S Pen apps, you can also use the S Pen as a remote, thanks to the Bluetooth low energy I mentioned before. You can first choose what app opens when you hold down the S Pen button, and then you can choose within specific apps what a single press or a double press does. Now in the camera, for example, you can single press to take a photo, great for selfies or being creepy on the subway, or double press to switch cameras. You can use it to change songs when playing music, present PowerPoints, etc. They've opened this up as an API as well, so other developers of other apps can integrate it into their apps in the future. Besides that, you can use the S Pen as a hover command like from a computer when hovering over items on the screen to bring up additional info. And it works on websites as if you were using a mouse, by the way. You can use it to turn your handwriting into text in any field by hovering over it and tapping the icon that appears. And also, thanks to Bluetooth, it can send an alarm if you walk too far away with the pen. And finally, you can adjust a bunch of these things in the S Pen settings on the phone. Lastly, let's go over the camera. For anyone who's familiar with the S9 Plus, a lot of this is going to sound familiar since it's basically an identical camera module. But there is some new software tricks that the Note 9 has that the S9 Plus, at least at the moment, who knows if they'll actually bring some of them to it or just keep it for the Note 9, doesn't. Firstly, if you're not familiar with the S9 Plus, because of the two sensors, we have the ability to go from a wider normal angle to a 2x zoom by tapping the button at the top right. Now, as far as the feature that Samsung is saying makes this camera better than the S9 Plus is the inclusion of what they call Scene Optimizer. It's similar to what we've seen in other devices now, though, where it automatically adjusts the color settings of an image that it recognizes what the subject matter is. Personally, regardless of what it's called, I always turn this off, and thankfully Samsung does include a setting to do that here as well. We also have a bunch of camera modes that you can get to by swiping left and right on the viewfinder. And for the rear camera, we have Food, which just ups the saturation as far as I can tell. Panorama, which lets you take multiple photos and it stitches them automatically together for a panoramic shot. Pro, which lets you manually control things like exposure, shutter speed, etc. Live Focus, which is Samsung's version of portrait mode basically. It'll separate the foreground and background and blur the background to mimic the shallow depth of field look. Now, unlike portrait mode on an iPhone though, it does allow you to adjust the depth of field after you take the photo, which is cool. Super Slo-Mo, this allows you to take a quick video of about 0.2 second bursts in 960 frames per second to then play back in super slow-mo. Slow motion, which allows the camera to do 240 frames per second at 1080p, that can be played back at 30 frames per second to get an 8x slow motion effect. Now, unlike super slow-mo though, this isn't as slow, but can be used for prolonged periods compared to the 0.2 second bursts. AR emoji, you can use this to create animated versions of yourself and friends that respond to your facial features and even use Disney characters, other stickers, etc. Hyperlapse, which is the opposite of slow motion, basically, and allows you to do time-lapse while moving. And on the front camera, we have Selfie Focus, which is live focus to blur the background around you, but on the front camera. Selfie, which is just the front camera. And Wide Selfie. Now this allows you to take a photo and rotate the camera left and right to stitch it all together to create a wider selfie image. And there you go, a lengthy but hopefully helpful walkthrough on the Note 9. Now, the Note 9 is available for pre-order starting now. It will be available on August 24th. The 128 gig model will cost $999, and the 512 gig model, which again is insane, will cost $1,250.99. As far as my opinion on the thing, I do like it so far, actually. I think it does feel more premium than the Note 8. It's just a slight thing, but I like it. It feels solid. I do also like that the camera has been bumped up to the S9 Plus, so it's on the latest cameras that Samsung has available. Would have been nice to see like maybe a little bit more of a bump in spec, but you know, we just want everything, don't we? Other than that, the properly sized battery. I'm super excited about that. So far, the battery life has been pretty good, but I'd like to see, obviously, in one of my battery tests, which I will be doing shortly, how it compares to, say, like the P20 Pro that also has the same size battery and is kind of the battery king so far that I've tested. Link to that battery test below if you want to check that out in the meantime. And the S Pen with the new Bluetooth settings and the new stuff that it can do, and just the S Pen in general is a unique feature. It's something that you're not going to find on a lot of devices. Samsung is committed to that, and so they still have it in this device. The Note series will always probably have it. But if you like using that pen, and I myself, if I have the pen, I end up finding that I do use it more often. If I don't have it, I don't necessarily miss it that much, but that's just me. But yeah, like taking the photos with it, like I can't wait to see like some of the other apps that I haven't got a chance to play with, but what they can do with the S Pen as well. It's just kind of one of those unique things that a Note does that other devices don't. There you go, guys, stay tuned for me putting it up in a camera comparison. We're actually doing something fun with that, so subscribe and hit the bell next to the word subscribe so you can notify when that goes live. I think you guys are gonna like that. I'll be posting some like screenshots from that. It's gonna look cool. Otherwise though, also the battery test. I'll be doing that soon as well. As always though, thanks for watching.